We'll get started. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Katherine Duffy, and I am the Director of Professional Development for SAES, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this important conversation on safety and security. I'm joined by Rob Devlin, our SAES Executive Director. Welcome, Rob. We're glad you're here. We are also grateful to welcome 4 panelists to this webinar who are experts in their field, and I'm confident that you're going to learn a lot today. But before we jump in, I want to turn it over to Rob. I want to introduce our guests. I want to talk about a few housekeeping things. We do want you to be interactive in this, and we know you have questions. But what we've got, the first part of this webinar is going to be around just kind of talking through some things, and then I think it'll spur on some additional questions. Please know that this webinar is being recorded. Everyone registered will receive the link. It'll be probably a day or so before you get that link. So just know, hopefully we can get it to you by Friday, but for sure by Monday. You will also receive copies of a resource page. So in real time, I'm going to be taking notes. So we've got a few things already on the resource page that we're going to discuss today, but if there are additional things that come out of the conversation, we will add that to it, and we're going to get that to you as well. As far as interaction, what we're going to ask you to do is keep your microphone muted during the call and interact with us via chat. We've got about 50 people on the call, so we want to be sure that that we don't have any background noise. But if you do have a question, I'm going to be monitoring the questions box and the chat. I would prefer you put your Q&A, your questions in the Q&A box so that I don't lose them in the chat. But do post your comments in the chat. If you have some resources that have not been mentioned, we'd love for you to post that in the chat. And if you have a question, put it in the Q&A box. If we need to, we will ask you to unmute and talk. So we'll do that as well. I think that's it for housekeeping, Rob. So if you would like to take it over and introduce our guests.
Absolutely. Well, I do have two more pieces of housekeeping I think that I'd like to mention. Number one, because we are an Episcopal Schools Association, I think it's always important for us to begin with the word of prayer. So, and now as I was reflecting and doing a little devotional this morning, the prayer attributed to St. Francis came to mind in light of this topic. So let's, the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
And let's pray. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, union. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, and it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Hey, thanks, you guys. So we're here to talk about a pretty important topic that has long been a very important topic in the world of schools, and is, of course, with the events happening across our nation in recent months, has risen once again to the top of our to-do list. And here in the Southwestern Association of Episcopal Schools, we recognize that we have a wide range of schools contexts. We have parish day schools, we have independent Episcopal schools, we have diocesan schools. We have schools with, $100,000 budgets and schools with $40 million budgets. We have schools with tons of resources. We have schools that have sprawling, wide open campuses, and we have schools that are urban and fenced in campuses, and everything in between. And layer on top of that the idea, the Episcopal ethos of being warm and inviting and welcoming and all that we strive to be as Episcopal communities. It prevents some unique challenges, but I don't think that the Episcopal ethos of being warm and welcoming, inviting, and providing a safe and secure learning environment for our families and for our students and for our faculties and staff are mutually exclusive. And we're going to explore some ways to manage that dynamic tension within our communities. A quick disclaimer, I think, is in order, right? The information that we're going to provide in this webinar does not, and it's not intended to constitute any kind of legal advice for you. The information, the content, the materials that we reference reference here today or for your general informational purposes. And then the information may not always represent the up to the minute most current legal advice or anything like that. It does contain some links and some references to some third parties, and the links and references are for your convenience as a participant. We're not necessarily recommending or endorsing these. We're providing them as resources for you. And then finally, the views that are expressed by SAES as well as by our guest panelists today are those of the individual participants in their individual capacities. They're not representative necessarily of their employers or of SAES. And I just want to mention those words of disclaimer before we get started. So we have with us some experts in the world of school security and in the world of corporate security. And so I'm super excited to have each and every one of those folks here on our campus, here on our call today. And rather than me try to introduce their long list of accolades and areas of expertise, I'm going to ask each one of them just to briefly introduce themselves, to tell us about their school community or their area of influence, if it's in the corporate world or in the government world, and what experience they have. If they're at a school, maybe they'll tell us a little bit about the profile of their school, so we'll have an understanding of the perspective that they happen to be coming from, and then we'll jump right in. Does that sound reasonable? So let's begin with Rodney. Rodney, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, sir. Thank you. My name is Rodney Thompson, and I come from my beginning background was in corporate security, also some residential security. And from that, I migrated into school security, and I've been here now at All Saints Episcopal School for 28 years. And so that is my background, and I'm happy to be here today.
So Rodney, tell me about All Saints. Where are y'all located? What's your size? What's your population like?
We are in Fort Worth, Texas. We are pre-K through 12th grade. Approximately 1,200 students, and we sit on about 150 acres.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rodney. Next up, we have Sergeant Roger Cavazos. Roger, will you want to introduce us?
Hi, good morning. Thank you for inviting me to this meeting. My name is Roger Cavazos. I'm a sergeant with the San Antonio Police Department. I've been with the San Antonio Police Department now for over 33 years. Have extensive background in protecting citizens, protecting schools and corporate entities. I started with St. George Episcopal School here in San Antonio back in 2018, and it's been a pleasure to take care of the school. The school has approximately 500 students that attend this school, and about 20 to 30 faculty. My officers and I have attempted the best that we can to protect the school and provide the school with the best advice that we have to offer. I think we have a very good program in place. We have boots on the ground, and we interact with the students and the faculty and parents in a very positive manner.
Awesome. And Roger, I will just, as a point of privilege, just mention what a joy it's been to be able to work with you when the school board at St. George recognized a need to layer up and add an extra layer of security on campus. It was such a blessing and an honor to be able to find somebody with your wealth of experience and your dedication to providing a safe and joyful environment. And you and your team and the resources that you provide at St. George have been invaluable. So it's great to see you again, my friend.
Yes, sir.
So next up, we have Daryl Taylor. Daryl, introduce yourself, if you don't mind, and tell us what you do and where your sphere of influence resides.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Daryl Taylor. I'm the Group Vice President of Security, Emergency Preparedness, and Loss Prevention for HEB. Hopefully, some of y'all are familiar with HEB and shop there, but it's a $37 billion privately held company. We operate 450 stores in Mexico and also Texas. I have two daughters that went to St. George, so know the St. George family well. So a little bit of my background. I have a master's degree in criminology and also done extensive studying with the Israeli Military Industries Academy in Tel Aviv and attended the Harvard Kennedy School of Crisis Leadership. So happy to be here and happy to help in any way I can and answer any questions.
So Daryl was an invaluable resource as we developed and redeveloped our threat assessment plans at St. George, and just a great friend. His girls are amazing as well. But Daryl, I appreciate you bringing your corporate perspective to see what we can learn here as school leaders to improve the safety and security of our community. So thank you guys very much. Next up, let's see, who have I not gotten to so far? Mary Catherine, who am I missing?
You're missing Donna. Where are you, Donna?
So Donna from St. Stephen's.
Donna Cowling. Are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Oh, there we go.
My name is Donna Cowling. I am the Director of Security at St. Stephen's Episcopal School in Austin. I've been here for 5 years. Prior to being here, I was assigned in Austin as a special agent with the FBI for approximately 25 years. And most of my time, though I worked a variety of programs and I managed a variety of programs, most of my time in the Bureau was with drug trafficking and gangs and violent crimes and things of those nature. A little bit about St. Stephen's. We were the first co-ed Episcopal school and integrated school. I believe we were the first integrated boarding school in the South. We have approximately 690 students. Of that 690, about 170 to 175 are boarding students. We're a 6th grade through 12th grade school. And we have kids that come here from numerous countries. And some years we have kids that come here up to 17 different countries. And we sit on 370 acres.
Awesome. Donna, thank you very much. To all of our participants, thank you all so much for taking time out of your schedule. Let's jump right in and begin our conversations today. I think we're going to maybe tackle this topic, and I'll kind of do some roundtable kind of stuff. But we'll talk about prevention or the actions that we can do as schools to stop something from happening in the first place. Right, being proactive and preventing any kind of disaster or tragedy. We'll talk about deterrence or the actions of discouraging an action or an event by instilling some doubt or some fear or some consequences. We'll talk a little bit about detection, right? How can we become aware of some actions or some potential actions or how can we develop a process of identifying the presence of a threat? Right. So that detection piece is going to be important. And then, of course, the response piece. How do we react to an action or to an event as it's unfolding or even after the fact? Right. So again, everything from how do we prevent it? How do we detect it? How do we deter it? And then how do we respond, God forbid, if something were to happen? So my first question to my panelists, and we'll kind of go around in order. I'm wondering, in light of the events that are happening across our nation right now and all the polarization and discord and dysfunction that we're seeing in our world, what is it with respect to school security that's keeping you up at night? What is your biggest risk? What's keeping you up at night? And I'll throw it to Donna first.
I think for St. Stephen's, since we are such a large campus, we have 300, like I said, we're at 370 acres. One side of our campus is the Capitol Texas Highway and the other is Lake Austin. So the size of our campus and the vulnerability of for someone to just be able to access our campus is something that I think about quite often. We recently just fenced most of our property and that has helped a bit, but I just think access to any large area is what keeps me up.
So campus access and securing the property itself. I'm not sure if any of our other schools are going to have as quite a large of acreage that you have, but we all have that challenge, right? Whether you're 5 acres like St. George's or 300 plus acres like St. Stephen's, how do we protect that perimeter and be aware of who's trying to come in and come out? I think that's an important consideration. Thank you very much, Donna. Next up, I'm going to ask Rodney, tell us a little bit about what keeps you up at night.
Well, for us, we feel like we do a really pretty good job of identifying people from the outside. They're coming into our campus. We have, throughout most of the day, we have one access point. You're going to hear people talk about the Raptor visitor management system. We actually use that at our front gate. It's controlled by the guards there. So we are very good at identifying you if you come through our front gate. Just like Donna, we have a large fence area. Of course, people could come through the fence, but it does deter in those areas. What keeps me up at night is the things that can go on from the inside. For instance, if we have parents involved in custody battles, if we have students or teachers who have issues within their personal lives that cause them to stray from their normal activities, things of that nature. That's what I worry about more than threats from the outside.
Very good. Rodney, thank you so much. And your campus, by the way, is fabulous. Please tell Dr. Bird we said hello.
We'll do it.
So Daryl, I'm curious from your perspective, from a corporate perspective, and again, so, zooming way out here, what is it that keeps you up at night as you manage security and threats across all of these school corporate campuses and store campuses across such a vast region?
Yeah, so, and I'm sure that most people have heard that there's usually pre-incident indicators when you have an adversarial attack, right? There's usually red flags that exist. For the most part, there's something in the background, but there's also the case in an open environment where we have guests, customers coming in, we don't know anything about them. And so to have someone that's completely unknown, not on your radar at all, that either randomly selects you as a target or just comes in, and you then force yourself into this reaction mode versus a strategy to identify early and mitigate is a grave concern. So that's probably the big one. The second one is, while I have access to all the employees that are on campus and I can train them and I can educate them and teach them as much as we can, at any given time, we may have 200 to 300 people on our campus that we have no access to, right? So customers, I don't have the ability to train and teach. So those two areas are some of the big ones that keep me up at night.
Awesome, Daryl. Thank you. And I certainly think there's some parallels, right? Well, all of us do a lot of training and work with our faculty and our staff, and we drill and we understand process and protocols. And we share that information with our parents, which is kind of maybe a similar version to your clients that come in the store. But we also know that, it's kind of hit and miss on what they're going to read and what they're going to absorb on any given day. And then you expand that to other visitors on campus through sporting events and through outside activities, or if we're a parish day school. Again, that challenge of being a warm, welcoming, inviting community adds that element of uncertainty about who's on your campus. And so I think your perspective is going to be super helpful, Daryl. Thank you. Roger, tell us a little bit about what keeps you up at night. And again, you probably haven't slept in about 33 years, right? With all the stuff you're worrying about all the time. But I'm curious, with respect to your work at St. George and with respect to the work at schools that you do, what is it from a school perspective that keeps you up at night?
So obviously there's a lot of things that ponder on my mind on a continual basis with what I do. But I agree with the other panelists. One of the primary concerns would be access to the campus. As we try to do at St. George, we try to limit points of access. It is a 5-acre or plus or minus campus site. So we try to limit it to controlled access points, and mainly the main entrance at the front of the Leadership Center. A lot of the people that do visit the campus are known by all staff members, so that makes it quite easy. But there are times where we do have visitors that are not known. So that is one of the biggest issues, the unknown that can enter the campus. You also have to ponder, as with everything that is going on, weapons that people can bring on. Weapons can consist of anything from edged weapons to blunt force instruments to actual firearms. So there's a large array of things that you have to be concerned with, not only being brought on a campus, but kept on the perimeter of the campus. Because if you want to effect some type of mass destruction, well, you can park a car on campus close to buildings and use explosive devices. So you've got to be alert to all those type of things. The other thing is, you kind of touched on a little bit, is drills. I constantly ponder about drills with not only the faculty and staff and the students involved, but also with my own personnel that are out there. Our officers are trained probably more so than most. And I can't speak for every department, but here in Texas, TCOL is what we are regulated by, and they require 40 hours of annual training every 2 years. Our department goes 40 and above every year. And so we tend to address situations that are occurring in other areas of the country and try to get on top of it and ahead of it before it actually occurs here. So we do quite a bit of active shooter training. We get the officers involved, and we are constantly on a threat assessment level. And that threat assessment level, you have to, and I'm sure a lot of our panelists would agree, you have to read it, digest it, dissect it to see what would be a possible threat that you could be dealing with in your area of expertise.
So thank you, Roger. Again, lots of us to think about. I'm hearing themes like access control, campus access, those kinds of things. But I'm also hearing the importance of training and drills as preventative and deterrence measures. I'm hearing also some information about internal threats and how to manage and how to understand what are some of the biggest risks to your campus. Before we drill down into some of those specifics and get some of that expertise, I'm wondering at a higher level, is there, what do you think, what is your opinion, to my panelists, the most effective thing that we could be or should be doing right now? What's the no-brainer, the low-hanging fruit that every school should be, kind of as a baseline? Again, remembering that some of our schools have massive resources and some of our schools have very limited resources. So what is some of this no-brainer stuff that we can talk about as an easy, low-hanging fruit to provide and help secure our campuses and our communities? So I'll begin this question with Roger. Give me a couple of one or two no-brainers.
Well, I would think that it would be beneficial for all to empower their staff, get them to understand that it's sort of like being in a supermarket or a retail establishment. Make contact with people. If you don't recognize them, find out who they are. It's not necessarily challenge them, but let them know that you're seen. You're aware that they're there. A lot of people do not like to be confronted and contacted. They want to stay in the shadows. So I would think that would be one of the primary basic principles: contact, recognize, identify.
Nice, Roger. Thank you. And I know that probably dovetails a lot with the training, Daryl, that you do with your crews at HEB. Do you have anything to add to that, or can you elaborate on what Roger was talking about with respect to, because I think that's part of the Israeli method, right? Is being able to recognize and question. And can you elaborate on that for us a little bit?
Yeah, I would say that, one of the, and you said the low hanging fruit, no brainers, and probably similar to the schools and what we deal with is, it's very hard to put one plan that would encompass all the different campuses, all the different formats. I mean, there's different hallways and classrooms and sizes and everything else. So one of the things I would really encourage is taking a real good current state view. Like, what are the realities of the campus that you're on? Because unless you have a good grasp of the realities, you don't know where the weaknesses are, what you need to build upon, where you need to go. And if you don't have that, you may also go in a direction or spend money that's not going to have a dramatic impact on the vulnerabilities for your campus. So, and it doesn't have to be with a lot of consultants, but just, a deep dive into, do all my locks work? Do I have a several rings of security, starting with a perimeter fencing, going to an internal perimeter, going into a classroom that locks? But using some of this common sense, which we all have, the sixth sense, is what's my current state? Where am I weak? Where am I strong? And how do I build upon that? The other one I would say is, and this is part of the Israeli method, they call it the DAPA, but it's really what are the MOs, the methods of operation that I'm actually trying to address? If you start in a place that says I'm trying to do everything, you're probably not going to get very far. But if you have the 3 to 5 MOs that you're trying to address, one of those being active shooter. I heard someone also mention, a non-custodial parent you may have issues with. You may have an internal threat. But if you have the 3 to 5 MOs you're trying to address, that'll focus your resources, focus what you do have going for you, and allow you to address those. Also, when you have the those 3 to 5 MOs, you start to look at what are the suspicion indicators or deviations from normal behavior that'll give you insight into that MO exists. So someone trying to enter into an area that's not a standard reception area, or coming at an off time to try to get onto campus to see a kid or something like that. But current state, goals and objectives, and then what's your strategy and tactics going to be? I think just some hard thinking, and that may be a small committee, but just really considering where you're at and where you're trying to go, and then put your plan together would be a place to start.
Hey,
Excellent.
Daryl, you know, Rob, if you don't mind me saying this, I appreciate you saying that, because I think as schools, we try to do it all. You know, we have a crisis management plan in our school, and it has we try to think of every single situation that could possibly happen and what we will do in that situation. And so I think it's really interesting and good advice to maybe pick and choose the top 3 to 5 that and really deep dive those and make sure that we know how to do those. Rob, do you see that in schools?
Oh, no, absolutely. And this is the advice that Daryl gave us. And so we were able to identify many of those things, the random, stranger off campus active shooter situation is one, of course, that we all plan for and drill for and try to prevent and detect and deter. But the other ones, I think that Rodney mentioned, the internal threat, the kid who is melting down and having an emotional crisis, and understanding how we can detect and prevent, and again, that's not going to be through access control systems. It's not going to be through armed security guards. It's not going to be through fences. It's going to be through other methods, and we'll get into that as well. But if you can identify those 3 or 5, the custodial parent situation, which always raises a high degree of emotion and anxiety among families, those kinds of things, and it makes it an efficient and effective way to really think about what are your threats, that threat assessment, and then how can you mitigate or prevent or detect or deter those. And Daryl was a huge resource for us in that, helping us understand that. And again, that's not a huge spend on our part, right?
Right.
Some of the resources that we do, we have spent some money on, and some of these that you'll hear later on too, are just about having conversations and understanding and applying resources that don't cost a ton of money, but have high degrees of effectiveness for your campus. So,
yeah.
Daryl, thank you so much. So Rodney, low-hanging fruit, no-brainers.
Well, I heard Daryl talking about, the rings around security and how those you come, it's those rings, you get closer and closer, you form different rings around what you're trying to protect. And in each of those rings, there's an opportunity for detection and an opportunity for deterrent, and an opportunity to actually stop something. But for me, the low-hanging fruit there would be we talked about just locking the doors. Teachers teaching with their classroom doors locked. And then, but on top of that, even with the perimeter doors, I would certainly want, even if you didn't have a security staff, one person designated maybe every hour or 2 to check perimeter doors and just make sure that they're all closed, that no one has propped the door open anywhere. I mean, certainly we can train, but people are going to prop doors open from time to time. So I would just have somebody designated to come along and close those doors.
Yep. Check what you expect. Nice, Rodney. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Donna, how about you? What do you comes to mind when we think about no-brainers and low-hanging fruit?
I think for us, the no-brainer is getting buy-in from our community for the processes that we have in place, and knowing that some teachers will have complete buy-in to our active shooter policy, and some are terrified of it. But when I say buy-in, since we're a 6th to 12th grade school, we actually teach our students and empower our students so that they know that they're part of the decision-making process and all of these things. And that buy-in also comes from the parents as well. I often say to people, if someone was walking into your backyard, would you ask them, excuse me, what are you doing in my backyard? Yes, you would, because they shouldn't be there. But At times, what we see is somebody that nobody knows on campus walking around, and nobody walks up to them and says, "Hi, how can I help you?" and help to identify who they are. And I think that that can't be just put back to the security staff, that it should be a part of the school community as a whole that helps to talk to a stranger who's on campus, figure out why they're there in a friendly way, but one that may de-escalate a situation if it were to occur. But you have to have the buy-in from the students, the faculty, the parents, even our residential families.
I think I've heard a common theme here from all of our panelists where and I'm going to use the word empower, right? I've heard from Roger, from Rodney, from Daryl, and Donna, this idea of empowering our staff, empowering our students, empowering our families. So you've got to do a little training and let them know what to expect, but empowering them to kind of be the face of your school, to extend that warm Episcopal welcome, but also to pay attention, to see something and to say something, right? And I hear that often in the trainings that I had been a part of. And if we can train our students, because they have a unique sense of what's going on with the rest of the student body, and they understand when kids are in crisis and when kids are in trouble to a higher degree. You know, they're the ones on social media who are paying attention to what's being said, right? And if we can empower them and encourage them and give them the tools, but also the permission to say something, so that they know that the trusted adults in their community can intervene when there's a crisis brewing under the radar. I think that's a great example of how we can empower somebody within our community, how we can empower a family, right? To just, hey, I'm so glad you're here. I don't recognize you. You know, welcome to St. George, to St. Stephen's, to All Saints. We're glad that you're here. Who are you looking for? Can I point you in the right? Oh, let me come over here. And again, that extends that Episcopal ethos of welcome and inclusion, but it also, in a friendly and you know, appropriate manner, lets people know that, hey, we're aware of what's going on. And I love that analogy of people coming into your backyard, right? Hey, and again, I think that the difference is someone came in my backyard, I probably wouldn't say, "Oh, welcome, I'm glad you're here." I'd say, "What the heck are you doing in my backyard?" But in our with respect to our school, I think we can train our folks just to welcome, because, you know, 98% of everything, 99% is going to be, you know, just people that are curious or are prospective parents, and you don't want to challenge them in a rude, you know, off-putting way, but you want to know who's on campus. And I would suggest that a family or somebody who's new to your community is going to really appreciate that more than be put off by that if you do it in the right way. So that empowerment piece is huge. Daryl, is there a group or somebody that you would recommend that can provide that kind of training that could help us learn how to question and how to understand? You know, you mentioned the suspicion indicators and things like that. Is there a group that if some of our schools want to learn how to get better at that, they could go to?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I'll recommend this group just because I've worked, you know, extensively with them and closely. But there's a group called Chameleon and Associates out of California that does a very good job at what we call security questioning and in addressing the threat. Another group, Dave Benson and Associates out of Florida, does an excellent job, and we've used them as consultants as well. And then thirdly, Gavin DeBecker and Associates, which is also out of California. They've recently opened a office here in San Antonio, but they're excellent in this you know, proactive threat assessment, we call it, and addressing early on. On the you know, just to expand a bit on, you know, empowering. So just to give you an example, in our stores, anybody can lock down a store. So if you're a 17-year-old carryout and you see something in the parking lot that you know, a guy taking a duffel bag out or a weapon out of his trunk or something, we expect that person would be able to throw the switch and lock down the store. Now, are we going to get it wrong? Absolutely. Is it going to be embarrassing sometimes? Probably. But the downside versus the upside, we'd rather make a mistake and try to lock down the store early than to have someone have to go through, you know, talking to 3 different supervisors And time is not your friend in one of these situations, right? Time and space can work against you. So we have to act quickly. Just an example of empowering that we try to preach.
Awesome.
Hey, Daryl, would you mind sticking in the chat how to spell those two resources? Is it Gavin D. Becker?
Yes,
Okay.
I'll
Put those, I got Chameleon as associates already on our resources, but if you'll put the other two, I'd appreciate it.
So I'm hearing also another trend of trying to take a holistic approach to safety and security on your campus. And of course, active shooter situations often get the press, and those are the ones that make the headlines, and those are the ones that we spend a ton of time and energy. But I wonder if we could spend a few minutes exploring a holistic approach to safety and security on your campus. And I think empowering is part of that. Certainly the access controls, the physical safety is part of it, but what are we missing, or what other kinds of things are elements of a holistic, all-encompassing program to provide a safe and secure community for our families? Donna, any thoughts on that?
I think there are some, I think there's some programs out there that can be used by schools that can help with that approach to knowing who's on your campus. One that we use is called Raptor. It's called through Raptor Tech, and it's a visitor management system. And if you are with a school that's, a pretty small school, in fact, it allows you to basically identify who's coming on, make sure they're not a registered sex offender, and it also allows you to print badges that the visitor or the contractor or the delivery person may wear while they're on the campus. So then the teachers, there is a sense of relief, or for anyone on the campus, when they see that badge, because they know that person's approved to be there. And I think it just adds to the overall, I guess in this day and age, it's hard for teachers because there is a heightened sense of being concerned of a shooter. And this is one thing that can actually just help de-escalate that panic that you might have.
Nice. Rodney, I'm curious if you have some thoughts on, an all-encompassing approach, right? Something that holistic approach to things. What are some things that we're not considering or haven't discussed yet?
Well, we use, of course, alarm systems throughout our buildings, and we give all of our teachers and the students also access to panic buttons all throughout the campus. So if they need us for any reason, they can push that panic button and we respond to that location. So I think that's those are on athletic fields, in many classrooms. They're in all the hallways and public areas. So that's one of the ways that we encompass everybody to have access directly to security.
Nice. Roger, in your work with the larger community, as well as with St. George, are you aware of any ideas with respect to kind of this holistic approach to, so we've talked about access controls, we've talked about visitor management systems, we've talked about alerting systems in a panic button situation. What other kinds of things can you think of in your perspective that would contribute to an all holistic approach to keeping a community safe?
So I realize that things run on ones and zeros, and a lot of schools do not have a lot of financial resources to compete with the big locations. So you try to expand on things and get your best bang for your buck. At St. George, what I've recommended, because we do have officers on site, basically boots on the ground, is that we add cameras. So you turn your one officer into, say, 20, 30 eyes with those individual cameras. Those cameras, the officers, if it's set up correctly, can be managed by them on their phones. So if the officer is in one area of the campus, he can view the cameras from that point of view and actually increase his field of view and observance of the entire campus. I like some of the things that Donna and Rodney had said. And I think that to to add on to that as well is providing your visitors with badges. Let the visitors, people know on campus that they've already been screened, that they've been identified. They do have a badge, identifies them with a name, and the badge indicates the school's logo or name on it. And then on top of that, have them escorted to the location that they're going. That adds another sense of confidence and security to the entire process. I know that every campus undoubtedly has custodial staff. Your custodial staff is constantly out and about. They are primarily your perimeter eyes. So they are also should be very empowered and have access with radios to let the front office know of something that's going on, and be sure you have access by phone or radio to your campus officers. Have emergency numbers available for them. Let them know who to call in the time of emergencies, and set up an alert system for all your faculty and staff members.
Awesome. And Daryl, any last thoughts on your side of things with respect to this holistic approach?
Yeah, I would say, you know, the majority of the space that we work in, I'd say probably 60 to 70% is prevention, right? Try to identify problems early, whether that's internal or external, mitigate those so that they don't act out, and then resolve it. But you still have this case where, again, with an unknown threat, response. And so, the concept we use is the body won't go where the mind hasn't been, which means if you haven't thought through this, exactly what you would do in an active shooter situation, you'll have a hard time making it up right then and there. So we use a process called a slow walk. So, although I'm sure everybody has done fire drills and you can do fire drills, a little bit more difficult to do an active shooter drill. They're done, but a slow walk is really person by person or group by group. Daryl, where would you run in the event that this happened? What fire exits exist to you? What door, if you had to lock yourself, is a good door? Is it a glass door? Is it a wooden door? Does it have a lock on it? And if you go through these, again, this practical approach, you may find 60 people running for the same door that fits 5 people in it, right? So it's called a slow walk, and it's a very methodical approach to where would you run, where would you hide, what could you fight with? But again, the body won't go where the mind hasn't been. And if you do this approach, you'll start to build that awareness and education. Interesting, I was in a store about 3 weeks ago. There was an employee there that had been at that same store for 20 years. They only knew where one fire exit was out of about 8. And it's because they don't work in the whole store. And I'm sure that's the same case in a lot of the classes and the facilities that on campuses, but knowing all the things that are available to you versus just that one door that you see every day, I think would serve us all well.
So I'm super intrigued by this idea, Daryl. And so I'm wondering if I hear what you're saying, maybe, grabbing the 4th grade and the 5th grade teaching team, maybe during an off period or something, and doing a slow walk with them, saying, okay, imagine, and we have a custodial situation, and the upset parent has circumvented security somehow, and we see them in the hall, and we can tell by the countenance on their face. How would you react? Who would you call? How would this be here? How would you protect your kids? Or you're walking across campus. Let's see, where could you go? What does it look like? How, and just having that slow walk in those conversations might be a more effective way than an all campus drill where we just go into lockdown mode and then test I'm saying those are important, clearly, but this whole notion of your body won't go where your mind hasn't been, let's take them in their minds to these places, and maybe in smaller groups or maybe even in larger groups during a teacher in service or something. Is that what you're suggesting? Yeah,
and I think with your staff is specifically, the one-on-one or the small group approach, right? Because what you'll see, at least our experience has been, if you can get kind of the leader to take action, if Rob runs for a fire exit, probably 3 to 4 to 5 people will follow you. If Rob hides under a desk, which is not a good option in my opinion, that you may have 3 to 5 other people trying to hide under a desk, right? So going on the person by person approach on what would you do is I think is time well served. The other thing I'm a huge advocate of is is red teaming everything that you put down or is in your plan to red team and testing it. And by red teaming, that is a simulation, so to speak, and try to see how folks react. And then you address, did this go well? Did this not go well? And I'll give a quick example. At Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, they red team, I think every shift the person is red teamed. So if they're a screener, if they're on the magnetometers, whatever it is, they are red teamed at least once on their shift. And you compare that to what we do some in the States, you may get one red team a month maybe. But it's a very practical exercise to where it gets people looking and watching for problems in their environment consistently.
So you and I have spoken about this concept of red teaming, but I'm not sure the folks on the call fully understand what you're talking about. Can you describe what a red team exercise is and how it's set up and designed?
Yeah, and I probably can't do it justice in the time that's allowed here, but it's a very controlled exercise where if the MO you're red teaming, for example, is an unwanted visitor, you would have somebody that would try to breach your rings of security, either talking their way through, going through an unlocked door, or whatever that would be, whatever the MO you've designed and you're trying to test, and see can they actually achieve that. And the beauty here is, all the folks on the call are going to be experts in their environment, and they'll know exactly, oh, it's that door that's always unlocked, or it's that door that's always propped open, or it's that place where people can always manage to get through. So you actually red team that weakness or that area and see how it goes. The key point is after the fact, you have to instruct everybody on what the results were. Like, yes, it's this door behind the campus that's always propped open, or whatever the case may be. Doesn't have to be an hour-long event. It can be 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, but it tests the weaknesses that you've identified, and then you put controls in place to correct that deficiency.
So Daryl, when you were describing this to me earlier, you mentioned something that didn't occur to me. You mentioned that lots of times your staff and your team knows that red teams are going to happen, right? So it's not a surprise. You're not trying to catch people. You're not trying to. You want them to know they're going to happen, and that way they're even more prepared. And they never know if it's a red team or if it's the real event, but they know that they're going to be tested, and that it's kind of a bloodless autopsy. We're not trying to cast blame. We're just trying to get better. And so, hey, front staff or cafeteria staff, we know that we're going to be doing some red teams, and some people may try to come in. And if they do, again, we'll debrief it afterwards. We're not trying to get anybody in trouble, but we want to learn where we're good, but we want to learn, more importantly, where we're not so good, so we can get better. Is that kind of the approach that you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. And it can't come across as a gotcha or a problem. In fact, our policy is we only let people red team if they failed red teams, right? So that they understand what it's like to not pass, right? And if you're, passing all the time, it's probably not a good sign either. But it's really meant to be an educator and not a punitive type drill, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. So you could get your neighbor down the street to kind of wander onto campus and see how far he can get, how far she can get, and bluff their way through. Oh yeah, I'm here to, and see how people interact them, and then come back later and say, look, this person got this far. How can we do better next time?
Yeah,
I think there's going to be a need, like in that situation, for the folks on the call that are, I'm thinking as a head of school, there's a real education piece with around this, because this is not something what we're used to doing in schools is full scale drills, right? We do drills. We don't. And so sometimes what we do is we get lax about, oh, we know it's a fire drill, or we know it's this kind of drill. But this idea of a red team, we have to educate people right on up front about there's a reason we're looking for these weaknesses. And so you can't be a perfectionist about that. I mean, that's what I hear you saying, Daryl, about what you guys taught, is that there will be failures. You will get caught having not done it right.
Yes. And I mean, just to emphasize this is not all of a sudden, like I decided to do a red team without coordinating.
That's right.
A lot of folks. This is whoever the leaders are, making sure it's very controlled. everybody agrees to what's going to take place. It's coordinated with those that need to know, because you don't ever want to jeopardize the safety and security of anybody when you're doing these. And I'm not talking about like, a mock weapon trying to walk through the front door or something. I'm talking about just a visitor trying to talk his way through the front, or, see if someone picks up on the peculiar, reasoning for wanting to get in the front door or something like that.
Right.
Well coordinated, well thought out, practical approach.
And it's a mindset change. It's a different mindset than what probably we usually do in schools, right? We want to see when we do a full scale drill, we want to see, oh, everybody did it exactly the way they were supposed to, and then we move on. And so I appreciate you saying the amount of education around doing something like this would be important before you just begin it.
Yeah, you definitely cannot do it just on the fly. It has to be a well thought out process.
Hey, so it's tons of great ideas and suggestions and insights from our panelists. But I've asked some questions, but I think it's going to be more helpful if we can transition over to the questions that our participants might have at this point. So, Mary Katherine, do you have a good sense of any questions coming through the chat?
Yeah, we have a few, and one of them is one of them, there's a couple together. This idea around the fencing of your campus, and should we invest in tall fences? We have shorter fences. Is it worth investing in taller ones, or chain link fences? What do we do about playground safety? So I think that's a lot of times the first thing that people think of is, oh, we've got to fence this place. But as Episcopal schools, we want to keep it welcome and open and feeling like it's not a prison. So what are everybody's thoughts around fencing, tall versus short, playground, that sort of thing? Is it worth the money to go ahead and do a massive fence?
So I'll toss that out to, let's go Donna first.
I absolutely believe it's important to have a fence around your property. And it's sort of like you're saying, you have to balance the Episcopal identity of we're inviting, we're welcoming. So do I want to put a 10-foot high wooden fence around my whole property? Probably not. But I do believe that you should have some sort of fence that someone is not going to it's not just waist height. It's got to be something that someone has to think about. How am I actually going to go over this, or how am I actually going to go around this? Because it is just the first initial deterrent to someone coming on the property.
Right.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with Donna. I'm a huge advocate of fences, or at least some type of perimeter, understanding that, fences can be very expensive, and they do need, in my opinion, need to be tall enough. I'm not a tall guy, I'm 5'5", but I should not be able to hurdle it, in an easy bound. But some type of perimeter, and absent the ability to have a fence, then what, again, kind of look at your current state, what then would be your perimeter? What could you use? But I'm a huge advocate of fencing.
Great. Anyone else?
I agree with their assessment of the perimeter fencing as well. But you don't want to make it seem like you are creating a prison environment. You still want it to be very inviting. I would do a fence of anywhere from 6, no more than 8 feet tall. But don't make it so enclosed that you can't see past it. If you make it so enclosed, you can't see what's on the other side. And sometimes being able to see through the fence is a very good point where you can see what's coming. So I am an advocate of fences as well. If you do lock them, be sure that your first responders have some sort of access to these fences. And just to expand a little bit on what Daryl was commenting earlier, I also advocate that your campuses develop plans for your first responders. Give these plans to your local police departments, to their SWAT teams, to their technical teams, so that they can have a schematics of your school. That way they know where the entry and access points are. It's very important that they understand also, if they have to breach into these locations, which way doors open and close. When they breach into a room, where is the door located? Is it against a wall? When they enter that room, what are they going to see? Is there closets in the far left corner up against the wall? Where the windows are? All these are very important tactical issues that the police departments will need when trying to save lives and get in there to resolve situations. And then I also agree with the planning. In situations where there's stressful environments, people tend to not be able to think very quickly. So you have to rely on muscle memory. If you train for that, muscle memory will kick in, and they have to be able to think past these critical incidents.
So that's a really interesting, Rob got kicked off. We're trying to get him back on, but that's a really interesting question to me around the police department and having your local police, whoever serves you, understand your campus. I really, we had a comment in the chat. Our local PD is coming during in-service to do a safety training. We will be in lockdown mode when they arrive, and they will let themselves in and check the campus to see how secure we are, then meet with all of us to discuss and train us further. That's a really cool idea. I wonder how many of our schools, and we can put this in the chat, have connected with their local PD with their campus map and just gotten that information. So if y'all do that, put that in the chat, because that's, I know some people do that at maybe even in smaller towns, but I'm wondering if everyone's doing that.
And also, I would include some type of photos with your schematics. Give them an actual view. If you have cameras set up and they're Wi-Fi accessible, be sure that your local police department, in a critical situation, if something happens, will have access to that Wi-Fi feed.
Wow, that's a great idea too. I like it. So that helps me go to another question around this idea of lockdown drills or active shooter drills. Remember, we talked a little bit about this in the beginning around, we have preschoolers, we have preschools that have 2-year-olds, toddlers, or whatever. Are active shooter drills and lockdown drills necessary? Are they helpful? Should we be doing them in addition to the other things we've talked about? Let's start with Rodney and get just kind of get your thoughts on, should we be doing these kinds of drills as a larger community?
Yes, I think there's anytime that you drill, it's just very important. The whole concept of muscle memory and everybody knowing their role. But as you drill, I think it's also important that you let people know, you empower everyone, that sometimes the plan doesn't survive contact with the enemy, so to speak. And you have to be able to adjust, and you have to have an open mind to doing something different. I'll give you an example. We have a lot of very young children whom we train with that we use lockdown. But as we get older, we give those kids the power to run if they can, especially in large open areas where there's nowhere to go and shut a door and lock a door. Just run and get away. And how far do you go? As far as you can. I mean, we will find you, but just go, get out. And so there's different ways to train, but I think absolutely that you have to train to get everybody on the same page.
Any other thoughts on that, on active shooter?
Yeah, I'll go. And I want to just digress super quickly back to the fence just for a second. One thing you want to do if you use fencing is make sure you put some signage on there that says, you're a school or in private property, enter through the front door or enter on Southern Street, because that allows you, if someone does come on the property, the signage is there. And if you have to call the police, then criminal trespassing can be put in place for that.
Okay, that's helpful.
But the active shooter drills, they are important, and they're extremely important. It is very different to do a drill with a 6th grader and a drill with a 2-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
I think when it comes to pre-K and younger kids, those drills are really more, they're geared towards the teachers. And what is the teacher going to do in this environment? Because there's a stranger on campus, whereas an older child will be one that is going to be involved and has to be a part of that decision-making process. And you have to also decide as a community, as a school campus, what kind of active shooter or armed intruder policies that you put in place. Some people do lockdown. St. Stephen's does. We practice avoid, deny, defend because of the situs of our campus. And so it's very different than lockdown. And with that said, you have to have a communication component in place of how are you going to communicate with the parents, or how are you going to communicate with the kids once all this starts to happen. And you have to be able to connect with each other through some platform.
That's helpful.
And to
Okay.
expect-
I have a question here from Cameron that I'd like him to unmute, if you don't mind, Cameron, and ask this question about, because I'm a little confused. Is there a concern regarding internal threats when considering who participates in active shooter drills? Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, thanks, Mary Catherine. I just know that many schools do this differently as far as what level of participation or what level of drilling they do with their students, kind of regardless of age, because there's some concern that maybe you don't want, all the students who are, statistically the most likely to, create some kind of disturbance in the school to know exactly what the plan is, like where everyone's going to be in a lockdown and that kind of stuff. And I'm just curious, where people fall on this, on that spectrum, and what people's thoughts are.
So that's a great question, right? Any thoughts on that from any of our school personnel?
I think it's a fine line, and I agree with you. So what we do, for instance, is we do drill. We do it. We should try to get it done twice a year. We're good if we can get it done once a year, but we don't publish exactly what we do, which is out to our parents and students. There are things that are discussed. And so it's sort of a double-edged sword. You've got to train your kids because you have to empower them in the sense, because we all know that when something like this happens, everything that we plan for, maybe 40% of it's going to go right, because we're going to panic, and it's just, that's what's going to happen. So unfortunately, I do think there is that, there's a risk that you take when you drill, that the kids are going to know exactly what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to Cameron's point too, right? He mentioned that statistically, that the most likely cause of disturbance in your school is from an insider. And Rodney had mentioned that earlier as well.
Right.
Maybe a student, or maybe a disgruntled staff member, or maybe somebody who's just, really, just in a really not a great mental or emotional state at the time. And that might be the source. And so I'm curious, are there any kinds of fences, if you will, or deterrents or things that we can use in schools to help mitigate any kind of risk from the inside? I want to throw that out to folks. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Rob, I would say, one of the things that we have going for us is our culture, and I'll use that from an HEB perspective, but it's a very caring culture. It's a culture where we want to help if somebody's in crisis or having an issue. We want to work that, and I'm sure that's the same for everybody on the call. And so if you leverage that to say, like, Daryl's not acting himself, right? So usually he's very upbeat, happy-go-lucky, very social, but all of a sudden I'm withdrawn, I'm separating myself. It doesn't mean that I'm necessarily going to be acting out in a violent way. It could be a marital issue. It could be a financial issue. I could have a sick kid. I could have whatever the reason, but you want to identify that so you can help. And I think part of identifying the insider threat is, again, that deviation from normal behavior, whatever it is, and then acting with your threat management team or your resources to prevent that from becoming more serious. And I think that's the one advantage we have, is that we do know our folks very well, as opposed to, the unknown customer or something like that. And so the students that the faculty that the staff that if you see it, then acting upon it. One of the data, and Donna can probably expand on this, I think it was an FBI published report, but the people most likely to see deviations from normal behavior are family members or close coworkers and associates. The people least likely to report are family members and coworkers and associates, right? So there's the problem. And so we got to remove the stigma that says that, trying to reach out and help doesn't mean that Daryl is a bad person or anything else. He's in some type of, I don't want to say crisis, but there's something there that's affecting him. And we have perhaps the ability to help, right? If that makes sense. And I think that's the one thing we can all leverage is our close relationships to help and prevent versus reacting and responding. And I don't know if Donna or somebody else wants to expand on, but that's always been a place we've started from.
Right. I think you're exactly right. And there are September 1st, 2017, there was a law put into place in Texas. It was called David's Law. And Roger may know about David Moloch, who was a San Antonio kid who committed suicide from cyberbullying. So this law was enacted by the legislature that said that public schools were mandated to put in an anonymous reporting system in place so that kids or parents or teachers, people who were not comfortable coming forward because they thought they were snitching, can put in an anonymous complaint with photos, or you can do text. And so I think that looking at the cost of what an anonymous reporting system would be, if you're a school, for instance, that has middle school and high school especially, is a great tool that you can use, because our kids are so tuned into each other through Snapchat, Instagram, everything that's out there, and they're not comfortable coming forward. But having that reporting system in place could help that communication piece. And I think there's a greater chance you would have if somebody's going to come forward when something happens or something's about to happen.
So Donna, I think that's a huge point, right? Is again, and to Cameron, thank you for bringing this up and to reminding us of where a key area of threat can be from the inside. And so what I hear Daryl saying is really empowering and encouraging and destigmatizing with our staff, with our students, with our families. And then from Donna, I'm hearing, providing some sort of reporting mechanism. And then a third thing that I'd like to suggest is something, it's leveraging technology to help you kind of see what's happening, right? And there's tools out there that'll kind of watch social media for you, that'll watch what's going on online, and can provide you with reports as members of that safety and leadership team at your school. An example that I'm familiar with is something called Gaggle. And as our students, as they use the different resources within the school community, and we're a Google school, and this has happened probably 8 or 10 times in the past couple of years, where someone will be journaling about thoughts of depression or thoughts of suicide or thoughts of frustration, and then that anonymously gets sent to it's picked up by the software and it's sent, and we are able to then intervene directly with that particular student and explore and visit with the parents and say, hey, just FYI, this is what we're seeing. What are you seeing at home? Get the counselors involved. And that's another, that technology, how can we leverage technology to help provide some extra eyes and ears? Roger mentioned the eyes and ears from video, but these are eyes and ears of what's going on out there on your school network. Not a perfect solution, right? I mean, it's not, kids today have all kinds of private accounts and things. And so there's no one-stop solution, but something to consider as well.
Yeah.
Rob, I would also consider contacting local police agencies, because a lot of them have mental health units, which they have officers that are trained in these fields. They also have counselors on board that they'll reach out to you and provide you with resources. Their fusion centers also monitor thousands and thousands of internet sites and messages, and they target and look at specific issues that can affect your schools or the surrounding areas and make you aware of. So reach out to your local police departments, and they will be more than happy to help you. They have specialized units that are set up for this purpose. If you don't have the resources to, it's an available resource to you and all the schools in that area.
Awesome.
Yeah, we have another question. This is a little bit of a segue, but I think it's really particularly important for those schools of our schools that are parish day schools. this idea of what safety measures should we take for schools who share a campus with the church where there are large events, funerals. Most of the time that'll be like, that's where it is, where there'll be a funeral in the middle of the day. What are your thoughts around that? Should we hire a security person for these events? I think this is particularly true for some of our smaller communities. I know we in Harlingen are a parish day school where we would have a parishioner pass away, and 2 days later we're having a big, huge event on campus, and there's people everywhere. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think when you have an influx of people, and you can easily have 100 to 300 people come onto your campus for such an event, that it can't hurt to have, whether it's you contract with a security company for those events or an off-duty officer for those events. And then if it is something that becomes, is it cost effective for us, you consider rolling that cost into the family as part of that. But you as a small school can't control that environment at all. And so just the presence of someone there will help.
So I can tell you from the experience at St. George that we hire officers for special events, whether it's for the church or it's a school activity. And it also lends to a very good rapport between the public, the people that are visiting the campus, the officers engage with them, and at the same time, providing the police presence, the uniform, it makes everybody feel very comfortable. You'll see that a lot of the parents and the visitors come up to the officers and in fact, thank them for being there. So it's a very positive environment for everybody concerned.
And I like what you said, Donna, that, one solution may be to try to roll that into the cost of the event. When some of our schools with some limited resources think about, oh my gosh, I would love to do that, but the cost of an officer for 4 hours, that just gets, and then maybe just rolling that in to the budget. And hey, if we're going to have a funeral, if we're going to have a special event or those kinds of things, then part of the rental fee includes that security presence.
Yeah, I think even I'm thinking even Grandparents' Day, when we had events like a Grandparents' Day, or bringing, even in our own community, it wasn't just the church. It was if we had our own community where a grandparent decided to bring the great aunt and the great uncle. And I mean, we don't say you can't do that. So I think the idea, and I personally, when I started at St. Albans so many years ago, the idea of having an officer on campus, that was stressful because it felt like, oh gosh, there's something wrong. But I don't think that's the case today. I think today people, that it feels good. It feels, so security on campus doesn't feel, because it's more the norm. Would you agree with that, Rob?
100%. Yeah, when we had that conversation and tried to decide, do we want an officer on campus? Do we go security or do we go local PD? We were within a separately incorporated municipal area. So do we go with that police department, or do we even broaden the scope and go with the San Antonio Police Department? And who has the best resources, who has the best connections to emergency services, who has the best training, who gives us the best bang for the buck? And so those are all the considerations that we had, but there was considerable concern about, oh my gosh, people are going to freak out. They're going to be upset. This officer, has their service weapon with them, and how are people going to react? And overwhelmingly supportive by the families, by church members, by everybody. And it's because the officers are trained and they understand that they're not they're approachable, they're present, they're visible. It's been overwhelmingly positive, at least from the perspective of St. George. I'm curious, Jessica Liebowitz, Jessica Morris is on the call. Do you have any insight on that, Jessica?
No, I think it was extremely positive, and I think the parents ended up getting used to it. And like Roger was saying, and it's all about. Let me turn my camera on. Sorry, I'm just hanging out in my office. And like Mr. Taylor was saying as well, it's all about that being preventative rather than reactive, and just getting on top of it. And it can be a little bit different when you have officers on campus, but they become part of your community, part of your family. And it's all about keeping our families and our community safe. So it just, the mentality, it was a complete mentality change, a mentality shift.
Yeah, and I
But we
think
all got on board with that.
Yeah, and I think it's true of in our culture, like I don't know. I walked off the plane yesterday and just happened to walk down and there was a police officer. It's like it doesn't even occur to me that that's weird anymore. And everywhere you go, whether I walk into HEB or I walk in wherever. So I think that's helpful to our schools, because now when a school decides to hire security for something, you don't have to teach that and reteach it about why we're doing it and no, there's nothing wrong. We're just taking precautions. So I like that. I did want to comment on something Melissa Pennell said, which I think is really good in case anybody missed this. So she says, as a preschool, 18 months to 5 years, this is referring to like the idea of training littles on active shooter. As a preschool, 18 months to 5 years, we use a story or game called Rabbit in the Hole, where our kids hear a story about baby bunnies hiding in a hole when the tree cutters come. Then we become the baby bunnies and practice finding our hiding spaces. When we drill, I enter the building yelling, bunnies in the hole, bunnies in the hole, and everyone gets to go to their hiding spot. Works great and doesn't scare the littles. And so I just think that's, Anne's Ivy's asking who the author of that book is. So Melissa, if you'll put that in the chat. But what a great way to not scare little kids and to teach them what to do.
Hey, so this conversation, I know we're coming up on an hour and a half already.
Yeah.
I want to be careful about our panelists' time. They've all donated their time and their expertise. And so maybe we can take one or two more questions, but I would like to at least share some of the resources in the chat that I've heard also. And I've got some, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can share. Do I have permission to share a screen
You
here?
should.
There we go. So here's some of the ones that I've heard, some that I haven't heard, but I know are out there. This group called I Love You Guys. And that's a foundation that's dedicated to providing safety and security and standard response protocols. It's named after a girl who was involved in a school shooting, and the text that she sent her family was, I love you guys. Great resource, tons of stuff there. I mentioned Gaggle, that's there as well. We heard something about Chameleon and Associates, as well as the other two groups I think that Daryl had mentioned. Many of you are probably aware of Texas State's and the Texas School Safety Center. But again, all of these are great resources. And I think Mary Katherine had some, we mentioned Raptor, we mentioned, did we mention Rave? I don't remember.
Yes, I've got all of those. I've got a number of things. I've got Rave and Raptor. I've got Chameleon. We're going to have all of these put in your resource page. So, and I believe Melissa is putting some stuff in the chat on a Rabbit in the Hole.
Awesome.
So yeah, I've got all of that on our resource page that you'll be getting directly.
So Mary Katherine, do we have time for one more question before we wrap it up?
We do, if anyone has one. I don't have any that we haven't asked thus far. But if anybody has any last additional questions, let's see here. We are currently reevaluating our crisis management plan. Is SAES going to have anything, any updated versions? This is from Cameron Taylor. I fear ours is simply outdated as the last major revision. Rob, I think that'd be a good thing for you to kind of touch on a little bit around, we require that for our accredited schools, a crisis management plan. Do you think that it's a good idea for people to really kind of, as in light of what we've talked about here, to take a look at that again? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. And there's no standard plan that SAES endorses because of the wide range of schools. But we have some samples that we can connect you with schools that are similar to yours, Cameron, that could maybe be a good resource for you. But I recommend to all of our schools that you make that a regular practice of evaluating. And I mean, these plans always are evolving. There's new information coming out. There's new resources. And unfortunately, you know, things that happen in our world and our society raise that to the top of the list once again. So yeah, I think that's a best practice for sure. Regular evaluation of your safety plan, evaluating the plan, reviewing the plan, training on the plan, understanding the plan, and then adding in some of these elements that you learned today about the slow walks or about the red teams or about different ways to train. Maybe there's some technology resources that you add to that plan as well. And then the philosophy behind that, right? And then understanding how we do threat assessments and understanding your top 3 to 5 MOs, and then developing strategies around each one of those. You know, I think all of that would be very time well spent for your plan. So anyway, I'm happy to connect you with groups that could provide, and I know all of our schools. I mean, again, any of the stuff that I did was a combination of things that I saw at many different schools across our association, and I'm happy to share it. I know all of our schools are happy to do that as well.
Yep, I agree.
All right. Hey, so again, I want to be careful of folks' time. I want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists who gave up their time and shared their expertise. It was so great to have each one of you on the call today. And I think that they have all agreed to share some contact information that'll come as well. So, you know, if you need some specific questions from each one of those, again, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to have everyone on campus, everyone on this call, Roger, Daryl, Donna. Thank you all so much for your time and attention today. Any parting words, Mary Katherine?
No, I just, I think I just got to reiterate to our panelists, you guys are a wealth of information, and truly we already met with them once. And Rob and I did and talked through all of this. So they've really given a pretty significant amount of time to this. And so just want to say thank you. Thank you for allowing us to send out your email. I appreciate that. It's sometimes I'm like, should I really give my email to that many people? But I know that you guys mean it when you say you're willing to help. And so we just want to say thank you again for giving of your time and your energy and your resources and all of that. So
and Rodney, Rodney's
yeah.
name. Rodney, again, yeah, thank you. So Donna, Rodney, Daryl, Roger, you guys are awesome. Really appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and stop the recording. If you are watching this on a recording, thank you so much for being here. And we'll hang around for just a second before we say goodbye.